All right, this is lecture number 4 on Hazlitt for our class, Wordsworth and His Circle. The last mini lecture, the one that addressed on my acquaintance with poets, ended rather abruptly, I'm afraid. That was a technical difficulty. I assure you, I was only about 3 sentences, if not 4, away from completing the presentation, so you really didn't miss anything. In this particular mini lecture, I'm going to speak briefly of 2 of Hazlitt's essays. One is the essay called On Going a Journey from 1821. It appeared in Hazlitt's collection of essays called Table Talk. Really very important collection for him, similar to the Elia essays for Charles Lamb. And then the next essay I'm going to discuss will be The Fight, which is from 1822. So, On Going a Journey is really about essay writing. There are 3 particular moments in this essay that show the entire piece to be kind of a metaphor for the sort of essay writing that Hazlitt wants to do. First and foremost, he says that when he goes on a journey, he wants to go by himself and he wants to go into the country. Why? The soul of a journey is liberty, perfect liberty to think, feel, just as one pleases. We go a journey chiefly to be free of all impediments and of all inconveniences, to leave ourselves behind, much more to get rid of others. It is because I want a little breathing space to muse on indifferent matters. So the idea here is that the journey is an open space to wander where one will with no fetters, but also it's a space to escape stable identity, the stable identity one has in the city where one is known and where one is expected to fulfill certain responsibilities. On a journey, you can create any kind of identity you want to. You're suddenly flexible, pliable, mercurial, and certainly we can imagine someone like Hazlitt wanting the eye of his essays to have the same kind of unfettered ability to roam. It's interesting that he says that he wants to muse on indifferent matters, given that indifference is such a key idea in his 1805 philosophical work, where he says that disinterestedness is sort of the highest form of human behavior because you escape personal bias when you can reach that state of disinterestedness. And in this case, indifferentness is similar, I think, escaping personal bias, personal limitation, in honor of wide-ranging speculation. Well, I told you that Hazlitt loved distinctions, antitheses, and here in this essay he develops one, the synthetical versus the analytical, where he says that on a journey, I am for the synthetical method in preference to the analytical. I am content to lay in a stock of ideas then, and to examine and anatomize them afterwards. I want to see my vague notions float like the down of the thistle before the breeze, and do not have them entangled in the briars and thorns of controversy. So I think the synthetic resembles what I've been referring to as the paratactical, where you're simply gathering information as it comes to you without worrying too much about organizing it, without worrying too much about what's more important than what else. You simply are open to whatever comes your way. You're stockpiling, you're accruing. You can think later, you can divide up later, you can triage later. But the writing of an essay, and this essay in particular, has that kind of feel of Hazlitt almost making it up as he's going along. There's a kind of open-ended improvisational feel to the piece. You'll notice that the piece is only 5 paragraphs. An opening paragraph that is quite brief, and then 4 extremely long paragraphs which I think is an apt way to exemplify the synthetic, just the accrual of detail versus the analytic. And finally, Hazlitt makes very clear uh, how important it is that he not be tied down to one particular identity. I mentioned this already early on in focusing on his desire for an open space, but later in the essay, he's very clear about the kind of identity that you have on a journey or lack thereof. He says, "Oh, it is great to shake off the trammels of the world and of public opinion, to lose our importunate, tormenting, everlasting personal identity in the elements of nature, and become the creature of the moment, clear of all ties, to hold to the universe only by a dish of sweetbreads, and to owe nothing but the score of the evening, no longer seeking for applause and meeting with contempt, to be known by no other title than the gentleman in the parlor." This idea of immediacy is very important, that on a journey you're responding to the now, the now, the now, and you're not worried about what has happened and what will happen. And part of what makes Hazlitt such a joy to read is that his language has that immediate feel. It's as if his words are on the very edge of the present moment. That's what gives the language that sense of directness, of vividness, and of a kind of a forward thrust. There's of gusto. That's another way of talking about the gusto, the power, the passion, the intensity of Hazlitt's language. Now, in no piece do we see the language of gusto more prominently displayed than in The Fight, which is probably the very first piece of literary sports writing. We see Hazlitt using antithesis again, talking about two fighters who are quite different. One very big, lumbering, strong fighter, one smaller, quick, more cunning fighter. And we see in his very language, in his syntax, in his diction, an effort to try to capture in words the movements and the blows of these fighters. So let me find an example of this for you in this most famous of essays. So here he is. The big fighter is called the gas man. The smaller fighter is neat. And here is a description. The gas man flew at his adversary like a tiger, struck 5 blows in as many seconds, 3 first, and then following him as he staggered back, 2 more, right and left, and down he fell. Let me start over. I missed that last bit. The gas man flew at his adversary like a tiger, struck 5 blows in as many seconds, 3 first, and then following him as he staggered back, 2 more, right and left, and down he fell, a mighty ruin. There was a shout, and I said, "There's no standing this." Neat seemed like a lifeless lump of flesh and bone, round which the gas man's blows played with the rapidity of electricity or lightning, and you imagined he would only be lifted up to be knocked down again. So you just hear that rat-a-tat of the language, the right and left, down he fell. 2 more, right and left, down he fell. But even on the level of sound effects, the rapidity of electricity, of lightning, lifted up to be knocked down again. There's hard consonants suggesting quick blows. And then we have another description of a knockout that has a similar kind of linguistic tour de force, where Hickman, Gasman, generally stood with his back to me, but in the scuffle he had changed positions, and Neat just then made a tremendous lunge at him and hit him full in the face. It was doubtful whether he would fall backwards or forwards. He hung suspended for a second or two, and then fell back, throwing his hands in the air and with his face lifted up to the sky. I never saw anything more terrific than his aspect just before he fell. All traces of life, of natural expression, were gone from him. His face was like a human skull, a death's head, spouting blood. His eyes were filled with blood, the nose streamed with blood, the mouth gaped blood. He was not like an actual man, but like a preternatural spectral appearance, or like one of the figures in Dante's Inferno. we see the athleticism here in Hazlitt's language, the athleticism that he himself expressed in playing the game of fives. Um, this is much different than Lamb. I mean, Lamb, the master of the long, quirky, weird sentence filled with puns and paradoxes and allusions. Uh, Here, there's a sharp, direct, stabbing kind of language that really almost punches you from the very page. This is Hazlitt. This is Gusto.